So, Julia, I would like to ask you a few questions more around, I think, the genesis of data strategy and digital transformations. And my first question would be, can you share with our listeners what drew you to the world of digital strategy and data management? I think you briefly alluded to it during your intro, but can you elaborate a little bit further?
So it was more actually of an accident than anything else. When I started at Bloomberg, I was assigned to a team, mortgage team, and there were two new people. And one of us was randomly assigned in doing more UX work. And I was randomly, user experience, basically building Bloomberg screens. And I was assigned into something I would call now data integrity work. And that was accidental, but that's what happened. So I did a little bit of work there. And then when I moved into management, that happened second time. After a few jobs, I moved on to Bear Stearns. Then eventually I was at Freddie Mac, and I decided that I want to manage teams. And again, there were two teams. I applied for a position of a manager. One team was to support front office application for a trading floor. And, that's the one I wanted because, front office applications, trading floor, a lot of visibility from the business. And the second one was managing reference data from different, like external reference and market data. Mm-hmm. I didn't get the first job. I did get the second. And then I realized I'm actually very good at this. So from then on, and the reason I think the difference that I brought even back then was how to make it useful across multiple purposes within the company. So my regional team was supposed to work just for one of the trading floors, and the way we've created the assets, they were used across the entire company. As Freddie Mac went through so many changes, everything we've built was used from trading floor to office of economists, to auditors, and to outside auditors, which at some point Freddie Mac had a lot of. Sure. So that's how I ended up with data. It's was happy accident, ended up being good.
Well, good job working through the sirens in the background without distraction.
Living in Manhattan, that's what happens.
Yeah, right. Well, Julia, how have you seen the role of data evolve in the enterprise space, especially considering your time at leading organizations?
So what I have seen, so let me start with Freddie Mac. So one of the reasons I wanted to have the front office job is because when I did get the data job, somebody on the business side and trading floor told me that I don't really envy you. The only time you get noticed when things break, you're like telephone. So that was then. And then, of course, things broke really badly, which is Lehman Brothers and financial crisis of 2008. And the regulators came in full force and said, well, we need to understand the exposure and risks of large financial institutions. And, again, if you from outside asking for exposure might be considered that's the difficult part. But the difficult part is figuring out what the Lehman Brothers means within the context of your company. Yeah. And companies very quickly realized that, and that was the birth of data governance and data management as a discipline. And that was the beginning of that evolution. So that was both business evolution, especially in the financial services, but then there was a technology evolution happening at the same time that had the advent of big data and a growth of analytical tools that allowed you bigger and bigger use of this data. So companies having invested so much in regulatory compliance turned around and said, well, we want to use that for the business purposes as well, and we have technologies to do it. So you went from data not being even part of the conversations to pretty much every executive nowadays saying, well, data is really important to the growth of my company, or data, or now AI, which is that way it gets actually very interesting.
Yeah, interesting, Julia. And speaking of AI, considering your experience in artificial intelligence, how does AI intersect with data and driving digital transformation? What would you say to that?
So AI is very interesting. So on one hand, we've been with machine learning analytics, AI, for a really long time. This is not new this year. What's new this year is that we have a generative AI tool that's available to consumers. So the visibility just blew up. But some of those capabilities, not generative, but analytical AI, existed before. And I always looked at it as one of the capabilities business has to get data, to get value out of data. So to provide insights, to provide predictions, to create efficiencies within the business. one of the wonderful things about AI and machine learning, like as one of the tool techniques behind it, is that it can also accelerate making the data more useful for providing of the insights and getting the business value out of it. And
Mhm.
that's the intersection of AI and digital transformation, because again, my definition of digital transformation, which may be a little bit, there is a lot of confusion. I don't know, Jack, if you came across that people are really confused when you say, what do you mean by digital transformation? You kind of have a range of possible responses.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, Julie. I think people tend to define that in different ways, for sure. And
Yeah.
sometimes you hear, for instance, ERP implementations considered to be digital transformations, and I assume to a certain degree they are. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but like a ERP implementation and a digital transformation aren't the same thing technically. But yeah, it's interesting, especially throughout our podcast here, and we talk a lot about digital transformation. And I do like to ask our guests to tell us how they define digital
Yeah.
transformation, because it's interesting, because there certainly seems to be variance in what that means exactly.
Yeah, so I do have a definition as well, and it's again, it's somebody who comes from data background, and ERP is part of. Like, I do agree, ERP is part of digital transformation. So my definition is end-to-end, straight-through processing of every single interaction and transaction across the company. So
Yeah.
it's getting all possible data up front. It's processing that data automatically. It's being able to connect and curate that data for every single use within the company, from operational use of operating whatever product to financial reporting to analytics to ERP. So ERP is part of it because ERP does do automation and straight through processing for that function. It's a lot broader than that. The reason this definition is a little different because what you get for a lot of people's mind, digital transformation means we're going to build a website or we're going to build an app.
Yeah.
But then we're going to have a lot of manual work behind the website and behind the app, and we're still going to have a really well-staffed and expensive call center because we're not processing everything we get within the company digitally. We have a lot of manuals. So that's digital transformation to me. Again, very important. End-to-end, all of the experiences, external, internal customers, and all of the reporting and insight.
That's
Does
a
that make
great.
sense to you, Jack?
Yeah, that's a great definition. I really like that. I think you're looking at it very holistically in terms of not just the technology, but the people and the processes to support that digital transformation as well. Is that a fair statement?
It's absolutely a fair statement. And that's, I think, one of the things that when people, there is statistics. For example,
Yeah.
McKinsey has 70% of companies fail at digital transformation initiatives.
Yeah.
And the major reason, I think, they look at it as a technology transformation and not business transformation.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Julia, let me ask you, what challenges do CEOs often face when trying to derive value from their data and digital assets? And maybe a second part of that would be, especially in the context of a merger or acquisition, which adds a whole nother layer on top of useful information, right? But what's your thoughts
Mhm.
there? What challenges do CEOs often face when trying to derive value?
There are many, and it depends where the company is in terms of their maturity of how they handle data
Yeah.
uh, and just their assets. So one of the major challenges, though, is what we've talked about, that a lot of data and technology, it's considered to be technology work. It's considered to be something that's driven by CIOs, and somehow magically it's going to transform the company kind of from the back front. It's not being seen as a clear alignment of digital transformation initiative with the business goal. So recently, I had a conversation with CEO of the company, and they've done a whole work of creating an AI strategy. And they've looked at AI strategy, and they came up with, okay, the first things we need to do is, to improve our data processing, to do or automate and standardize our business processes, and then we can do the rest of it. But one of the things that came out in that conversation, that CEO has in mind the goal of doubling their revenues in 5 years,
Hmm.
but the strategy they came up with, so the approach is not aligned to that goal. So you have a breakdown between technology capability and business strategy. And I think that's the major thing, because CEOs or business leadership has in mind, here is our goal. This is what I'm driving to. And then there is all the stuff that's happening with data and technology, but there is no connective tissue in the middle. How specifically these things drive. And though it's very easy to go and develop something that has nothing to do with the strategy, I mean, it might be a good thing to do, but it doesn't drive the strategy.